Karen's face drained of color the moment the sheriff flipped through the papers. His finger dragged across the signatures, the official county stamps, and the precise coordinate maps, details she had never bothered to check before launching her crusade. The sheriff's calm authority made every word feel heavier, every silence longer. Karen swallowed hard, her lips trembling. This must be a mistake, she whispered, though the doubt in her voice betrayed her. For years, she had acted like the neighborhood queen, throwing rules around like weapons, dictating paint colors, mailbox heights, lawn lengths. But in this moment, the woman who ruled with a clipboard suddenly looked like someone who didn't belong in her own authority. The excavator operators, who moments earlier stood ready to rip into the vines, took several steps back. One of them even shut off his engine completely. They glanced at one another, nervous, realizing the job they had been ordered to do could have landed them in serious legal trouble. The sheriff stepped closer to Karen, lowering his voice but sharpening his tone. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you nearly destroyed a private agricultural property. You understand how serious that is? This isn't an HOA flower bed. This is someone's business, someone's livelihood." Karen's breath caught. Behind her, the growing group of neighbors murmured in surprise. People who once nodded obediently at her HOA letters now whispered with a mixture of judgment and fascination. Some hid their smirks. Others pulled out their phones, recording every humiliating second. A few gasped, realizing how close she had come to committing a major violation. Karen had never looked so small. She opened her mouth to defend herself, tried to spit out a counterargument, a rule, a paragraph from the HOA manual, but everything tangled in her throat. All that emerged were broken, jumbled words. John didn't. This area, I thought." She couldn't finish a sentence, because for the first time, the truth stood taller than her clipboard. The sheriff crossed his arms. "Ma'am, if you had gone through with this, you could have been arrested on the spot and sued. The damage alone could have cost you tens of thousands." Karen's knees visibly weakened. And then, something rare happened. Reality finally broke through her arrogance. She turned slowly, shakily, toward John, the man she had harassed for months with warnings, emails, and threats. The man who never raised his voice, never retaliated. The man she had almost destroyed today out of pure ego. Her eyes glistened with embarrassment. She took a small, fragile breath, and she said words she had never said in her entire HOA career. "John, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this." Her voice cracked at the end. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't lecturing. She was pleading. John stood quietly, looking at her, not with triumph, not with anger, but with a calm steadiness she didn't expect. He didn't gloat. He didn't mock. He didn't rub the victory in her face, but he simply nodded. Then he turned to the sheriff and said, with the same quiet dignity he had shown all along, "I don't want to press charges, as long as she leaves and never interferes again." It was mercy, unexpected, undeserved, but powerful. Karen exhaled shakily, almost collapsing with relief. She turned to the excavator crew and waved her hand weakly. "Stop. We're done here. Leave." The workers didn't wait a second. Within moments, the hulking machines roared to life, reversed and drove away, leaving deep tracks in the dirt, but not a single vine destroyed. Karen hurried to her car, head down, shielding her face like someone escaping a spotlight. She didn't speak another word. She didn't dare meet anyone's eyes. She drove away faster than she should have, tires crunching the gravel as she fled the scene of her own downfall. As the last engine faded into the distance, the air felt lighter, quieter, safer. John finally turned toward his vineyard. The chaos had left dust on the leaves, but the vines themselves stood proud and untouched. He reached out and gently brushed his fingertips along the nearest grape cluster, checking it, calming himself, grounding himself. The sunset washed the rows in golden orange light, painting the vineyard in a glow that felt almost symbolic. And in that silence, he realized something important. Sometimes justice doesn't come from shouting or fighting back. Sometimes it doesn't come from revenge or anger. Sometimes it comes from the truth written clearly on a deed. And that truth Those papers the sheriff held had been enough to send Karen running home in silence. John had spent 5 long, patient, almost back-breaking years transforming a barren piece of earth into something beautiful, something alive. What started as an empty, sun-scorched land had become a lush vineyard stretching across gentle slopes, each row of vines carefully trimmed, watered, and nurtured like a living diary of a struggle. The grapes were entering their final stage of ripening now, glowing like clusters of deep purple jewels under the soft morning sun. This was the season he had waited for, the first real harvest of his own hands. Every morning he walked between the rows, touching leaves, checking the fruit, listening to the wind like it was whispering progress. That morning, though, the air carried a different sound, deep, metallic violet. A heavy rumble rolled beneath the soil, vibrating through his boots. John froze for a moment, confusion tightening his chest. Then came another rumble. And another. He rushed toward the front gate, dust rising behind him as he ran. As he reached the opening between the trees, his heart practically dropped into his stomach. 2 massive excavators were parked right outside his vineyard, engines growling like beasts ready to swallow everything in their path. And standing proudly in front of them, hands on hips, chin raised, clipboard clutched like a weapon, was Karen, the HOA president, the woman who lived for rules, the woman who believed the entire neighborhood belonged to her authority, the woman who had been complaining for years that John's vineyard ruined the uniform aesthetic. Karen glanced at him and smirked, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "John," she barked, lifting the clipboard as though it were a badge. "This vineyard violates HOA land use rules. We're clearing it." Before he could respond, she waved her hand sharply toward the machines. "Start cutting. Begin with the north side first." One of the excavators lurched forward, its massive metal claw lifted, casting a shadow over the first row of grapes. Soil crumbled beneath its tracks as it inched dangerously close to the vines John had raised from tiny shoots into healthy, fruit-bearing lines. "What the hell are you doing?" John shouted, sprinting across the dirt. His boots skidded as he reached the machine. Without a second thought, he positioned himself directly between the excavator's claw and the first row of vines. His breath was hard, his pulse thundered, but he didn't move. The operator froze, startled, his hand hovering over the controls. John planted his feet firmly. "Karen, this is my land. These trees and vines are legally mine," he warned, voice steady but blazing with anger. "Back off." Karen crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and gave him the most infuriating smirk he had ever seen. "You don't get to block HOA maintenance, John," she said coldly. "These vines are coming down today." The excavator operator still didn't move. He looked nervous, unsure, glancing between John and Karen. She snapped at him again. "I said keep going. Ignore him." The operator hesitated again, but Karen's temper was boiling. She marched forward, face red, and yanked out her phone. "That's it," she snapped. "I'm calling the police." John didn't budge. He didn't yell back. He stood his ground, the way a man stands when everything he worked for is on the line. "Officer," she said loudly the moment the call connected, "we have a hostile homeowner blocking community maintenance. He's trying to stop us from removing unauthorized plants." John closed his eyes for a moment. Karen didn't just twist the truth, she strangled it. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens approached. Several police cars pulled up, and neighbors stepped out onto their porches, curious eyes watching the drama unfold. Some recorded on their phones. Some whispered. Karen looked triumphant. John stepped forward, pulling out a thick folder from the small lockbox near the gate, the deed to his property. Inside were surveys, maps, records from the county, every last legal detail proving that his vineyard was completely outside HOA boundaries. He handed it to the sheriff calmly, without any trace of panic. The sheriff flipped through the pages, scanning the documents slowly and carefully. Then he looked up at John, then at Karen. His expression darkened. "Ma'am," the sheriff said, straightening. "This land," he tapped the deed, "doesn't belong to the HOA at all." Karen blinked, then blinked again. Her face drained of color, but before she could respond,